On page 227, you will find this is a describing food anchor chart. What happened here was we were describing a lot of different foods in our classroom. So what we did was we made a little anchor chart where we drew an eyeball for what does it look like. We drew a hand for what does it feel like, an ear for sounds, and then we drew a mouth, and also you may want to put a nose there. Typically I like to put both smell and taste in the same column. And then anything that we were actually tasting, looking at, listening to as we ate it, or smelling, we would put those descriptive words in these boxes. This was an activity that we did when we were first learning about ways to describe objects. So we went to food so that we could use all the 5 senses. Go to page 228. On 228, this graphic organizer is for your students to use to generate different descriptive words before they actually go to write about something. In other words, the students were going to be writing about a birthday cake in a story they were going to write. So we thought, let's make a word bank. How would we describe a birthday cake in this story? And we want to use 5 senses words. So what does the cake look like, sound like when we're eating it, taste like, smell like, feel like? Also, how do we feel when we're eating that cake? And then also we would want to look at the amount. In other words, I'm looking at the amount of frosting, or I'm looking at an amount type of phrase when I talk about that cake. So when you see we were talking about how would you describe the cake, we would ask, what kind of birthday cake is it? What kind of cake? Gooey, moist, sugary, spongy, mouth-watering, eye-popping. Our taste buds are going to be dancing. Our dancing taste buds. What kind of taste buds? Dancing. If I'm going to tell you how I feel when I eat the cake, then I'm going to have my describing word of hungry, or I'm going to have excited. If I talk about when I'm looking at the amounts of cake, I could say huge, or maybe I'm talking about frosting, mounds of frosting, or I'm just giving a phrase, a slice of delight. So now we have all these different ways that we're describing that cake. So when we go to write our story, we have these descriptive words and phrases as well. This is an activity you can do where when you're writing a story, you may identify one thing in that story that you really want to describe and make come alive. Do this little brainstorm and then go back and refer to this brainstorm to add that description to your writing. On page 229, you'll see this same activity was done for a flower. This was for informational writing. Notice we looked at what does the flower look like, smell like, feel like. So we identified which of the 5 senses made sense when we were describing the flower. Then we went to the feeling. So what kind of flower, how would a flower feel? Healthy, delicate, fragile. And then the amounts, we're looking at describing the amount as in the size, speed, shape. So we had oval, small, tiny, thin. So we had all these descriptive words. Where did we find these descriptive words? Not only did the students come up with these ideas, but we also went back to the books that we were reading and we found different descriptive words describing plants, and in this case, a flower. On page 230, you have the black line master of what will you describe? And again, I love to say to students, what will you describe? What's the most important thing in our piece of writing that we want to describe? Then we can go back and brainstorm this. You could do this before you write or after you write and then go back in and add that information through a revision process, or do it before you write so that you have that descriptive language available during your planning process. On page 231, you'll see narrative flip books. These are actually black line masters that I have in this chapter for you so that you could have flip books for the when, where, or who, the characters, of a story. I love to use these flip charts when we're writing stories together. We can flip through the when and the where for our setting and the who different flip charts, and you'll notice when we go through the rest of this section, I either have the who as in people or I have another flip book for who as in animals. So I've separated out people and animals for the who flip books. There's 2 of those. On the bottom of this page, you'll see a student had flipped open in a center the sun, the ocean, and a surfer. They had planned their character and setting for the beginning of their story. It's a way for students who can't come up with an idea for a story to actually use this to help them generate the beginning of their stories. In the matching page, the same thing was done in the center where a student had late one night in the desert, and then they had a turtle or tortoise. And then they went on to say what the character was doing. We have our flip books here that you could use, again, in centers where children could just access them to create their own stories. You can also have these flip books in your teacher toolkit when you're writing stories with students. I showed this during the narrative writing section of our book where I had these tools, and I had this container where I had these flip books. So we have our flip books that can be stored in a container or put into a small center for students to access on their own. We have different pictures for when. So we have our when is the story happening, and then you have different pictures that you can flip through to decide when the story's happening. So here we have on a windy day long ago, on a summer day, a sunny day, a wintry day. You have all these different pictures that students could access to come up with their when part of a setting. You have the where setting. These are large settings. This is the big location of a story. So that's why it's really important kids understand that. So this could be the ocean, a pond, the desert, down at the park. We have all different types of where parts of our setting. And then I also have pictures for the who, and notice I color in the person when these are pictures of characters that are people, like a police officer, a surfer, a baseball player. We have all different characters for our who. And then our who for animals, we have all different animals in our who book. And you have black line masters of this. So you can use this to help generate your setting and characters for your whole group stories, or put it in a center so students can come up with different ideas using these flip books for their own stories. On page 232, you have the when pictures. So we have our when cover for the flip book, the sun, sunny day, summer day, hot day, early in the morning. You have your rain coming out of a cloud, a rainy day, an overcast day, a foggy day, late at night, a windy day. You have your long ago, you have your wintry day, you have a spring day, one lovely day. There's many different ways that you can say these when pictures. If you turn the page, you'll see all the pictures for where. So now we have the ocean, a pond, a river. We have out in the country, in the mountains, the desert, the city, in the neighborhood, at the park, down on the farm, many different where pictures, and you can keep adding to these flip books as well. So here we have our who picture, and these pictures are of animals. So you would color in the animal. You want to keep adding to this flip book, but you also want to say to children, when you're thinking of an animal, you could look at these pictures for ideas, but you can also tell them that you can go to their habitat. When you say habitat to the children, where the animals live, that's going to help them go into their brain and come up with even more ideas. So you may want to say, boys and girls, we are going to jump into the ocean. What animals do you see? Let's go to the mountains. What animals do you see? Let's go to the jungle. Let's go to the Sierra, the desert. So give the big habitat, give a big location, and then you can show pictures of different animals or give kids that whole thinking process of how they can come up with even more ideas. So when we have animals, show the different pictures, but also say, let's jump into the ocean. What do you see? Let's go to the mountains. What do you see? It's teaching them to go into their brain, into categories, habitats, in order to think of other animals, so they don't keep saying dog or cat. Turn to page 238, 239 for who, as in who is in our story, a person or an animal. These cards are for a person. I have many different pictures here of people, which again, you would want to keep adding to. We have an artist, a painter, we have a plumber, we have a fairy, we have a surfer, a police officer, we have a baseball player. Kids can just keep adding and adding and adding. When I come up with a person in our story, it's great to show these pictures, but also to have kids go to categories in their mind to come up with even more ideas. So I always like to say that people live, work, and play. And when they live, we can think of people that live around us that could be in our story. So I could be writing about people in my family, people in my neighborhood. Or I could talk about work. These are jobs that people have. So a plumber, a firefighter, a police officer, a teacher, a doctor. Or people play. These are things people love to do. So now I could have surfer, mountain climber. I could have somebody who is a stamp collector. I could have all these different things that people like to do when they play. You can also say an imaginary person, character in our story. So that's why I have the fairy there, so that we can have an imaginary character as well. So this is not only pictures for your students to come up with ideas, but also for you to have them understand that they can go in their head and come up with even more. This ends our mentor text to anchor chart walls for your kinder and first graders. These are so many different charts as well as tools that you can use to help access words and phrases for your students to use in their narrative writing, in their informational writing, their opinion writing. And it also is a wonderful activity for you to connect reading to writing. Build them slowly as you start your year and throughout the year. Because if students are using these words in their reading and their oral language, if you then put them up on the anchor chart, they actually can find them and know how to use them in their own writing. You should start your year off with the anchor charts that you think are going to be best for your students, but they should be blank. And then as you're reading stories, as you're rehearsing movie scripts, as you're writing lecture notes, you can pull those words and phrases from stories, lecture notes, and movie scripts and put them up on your anchor charts. If you already have words and phrases on your anchor charts at the beginning of the school year and kids haven't seen them in their writing, haven't used them in their language, it will become very difficult for them to access them and use them in their own writing. Good luck, and I hope that you have a room filled with anchor charts for your students to access.